before we dive into our review, do want to look at some of the numbers and some of the performance of this movie so far, because we now do have the opening weekend box office results. And initial projections for Captain America Brave New World had the movie opening to at least $90 million over this President's Day weekend, which is a 4-day weekend. Historically, Marvel has selected some of these dates over the past couple of years. And Captain America Brave New World, as of now, stands as a pretty successful launch over the 4-day President's Day weekend. It's the fourth best launch for this particular weekend, and it's only behind three other superhero movies in Black Panther, Deadpool, and Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. Domestically, the movie made $100 million in 4 days. Internationally, it brought in another $92.4 million for a collective total of $192.4 million. Now, the movie financially so far is a success. It's already made back its production budget, which is reportedly $180 million. On the commercial, or I should say the critical receptive side of things, it's a little bit murkier. Right now, Captain America Brave New World is standing at a 51% critic score. Audiences seem to love it a little bit more because currently that audience score on Rotten Tomatoes is at an 80%. However, Captain America Brave New World has secured the lowest ever cinema score for an MCU film, currently with a B-. The previous lowest films were Eternals, Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, and the Marvels, which all secured a B+. And prior to 2021, this is interesting, only one MCU movie had produced anything lower than an A cinema score, and that was Thor in 2011, which scored a B+. Conversely, 6 of the last 10 MCU movies have produced a B+ or lower cinema score. And again, cinema score is a tracking system that is used on opening night of the film. Basically, people are there at the theater and they give you cards and you rate the movie in terms of what your expectations were. That's what fans are rating it on. Did it meet your expectations? And then they give it this grade. And so B- right now, the lowest ever for an MCU film. But financially, it's doing well so far. Comparatively, if you look at just a couple of years ago with Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, that movie in the 4-day weekend, the same weekend, pulled in $120 million over the 4-day, and globally it did $241.3 million. So this is a drop off from Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. And then if you compare it to the other Captain America films, it's the third highest debut for a Captain America film. In terms of a 3-day weekend specifically, it is behind Civil War, which was like Avengers 2.5 when that came out. That made $179.1 million in its opening weekend. And then Captain America, the Winter Soldier, made $95 million in its opening weekend, which is the 3-day weekend. And technically 3 days, Captain America Brave New World made a little bit less than Winter Soldier, but it did make more than Captain America, the First Avenger. So right now, it's doing okay. The question with these things are always, well, what are its legs going to be? How well is it going to perform in the next few weeks? What's the drop-off going to look like in weekend 2, weekend 3? How many people will return to see this movie and do repeat viewings, especially considering what the word of mouth looks like, which is, I guess, at best, a little bit mixed. Critics are very so-so on it, 51%. That means that the majority technically have given it a positive RT score, but that's still not that great considering just previous MCU entries. I think that this represents the third lowest critic score for Rotten Tomatoes, only above Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania and Eternals. And so just like with all of this information, where things are right now with the box office and where it could potentially go, I mean, what are your prospects? What do you think that this movie can do? How successful do you think it'll be? And what does that weekend 2 performance look like when we get to next weekend?
Man, good questions, because this is such a weird movie just across the board. Of course, critic score versus audience score and the numbers and the box office. It's so interesting. I think I think it'll be okay in the coming weeks. I don't know. I don't think it'll do anything substantial or great, I think, past this kind of opening weekend, but I think it'll do okay. I think people, because kind of some of the discourse, it actually, for some people I've seen it help. Some people are like, that's interesting, I'm going to go see it. And I've heard, I think a lot of people that I'm not used to honestly seeing MCU films, at least that first weekend, I'm hearing a lot of people actually went to go see this film. And I think that is a little different. I think from my own circles and my own people, some of my own people that I know, I'm like, oh, you've already seen the movie. Okay, cool. And that gives me, again, somewhat of an indication that I think it'll do okay in the coming weeks. We'll just have to see where it'll land. I don't know. That's another hard one for me. I think it can and will, of course, hit the. I think it will hit the 500 mark. I think it has that capability to hit the 500 mark. But in terms of what it can do past that, I really don't know. It's such a crazy atmosphere with this film. It's hard for me to tell. So yeah, man, we'll really have to see. I think this next weekend will help me tell. This next weekend will help me tell what kind of legs it has. But for now, it's like I don't know. It's kind of a black box for me. It's kind of murky. I have to wait and see.
I don't think it's going to end up doing that well, personally. I think that if you compare the two films coming out the same weekend, just 2 years apart,
Mm-hmm.
Captain America Brave New World, in comparison to Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania, has done less than what that
Right.
movie did 2 years ago over the 4-day weekend. $20 million less. And the drop-off for Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania after that opening weekend was substantial. It was one of the largest drop-offs from week to week for a comic book movie ever. And ultimately, we saw that movie only ended up making $476 million worldwide. Now, for most movies, that would be a huge win. For an MCU movie that reportedly at that time cost $388 million, that doesn't cut it. That's not profitable by any stretch of the imagination. Conventional wisdom says that a movie needs to make at least about 2 to 2.5 times its production budget in order to be considered profitable, or at least break even, I think. And just based on what the word of mouth is for Captain America, even though it could be worse, and we've seen worse Rotten Tomato scores and things of that nature, I just think that people are going to look at all of that information and say, you know what? I'm not hearing the greatest things about it. I'm not hearing that it's spectacular. Nobody's really saying that. Most people are probably saying like, it's okay. It's definitely probably mid-tier or lower level. It's like a 6. It's like a C. Like when you start to hear stuff like that, that doesn't entice somebody to say, yeah, I'm going to get out of my house, spend money on a ticket, take out 2, 3, 4 hours of my day to go see this. Like people aren't doing that. Not in this current temperature of movie going. People are like, no, I'll wait because it'll be on Disney Plus within 2 months, maybe 3 months. And people are certainly willing to wait. We've seen that countless times and times again. And the MCU over the past 5 or 6 years, they've not created that demand for most of their movies to feel like the must-see events where people have to rush out to see them. Opening weekends have always just historically done well. There's always that baked-in audience, that loyal audience that'll show up opening weekend. People like you and I, that it doesn't really matter. We're going to show up. What tells the story of a movie's financial prospects is always those next few weekends. That's why historically you see a lot of animated movies perform really well even after the first opening weekend. They'll perform well into week 2, week 3, week 4, week 5, because families are like, oh, I heard decent things about them. I can't get to it in the first 3 days, but I'll get to it week 2, week 3. Like it'll still be playing. Superhero movies and these Marvel movies lately, that's just not been the case. And again, you just look at Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania, considering that this has already done less than that, and that movie already had a substantial drop off, and it had similar Rotten Tomato scores, similar cinema scores, similar negative reaction or somewhat middling mid reaction to the film. I think that Captain America Brave New World is probably going to suffer a substantial drop off in weekend 2, and I don't think it'll hit 500 million worldwide. And I think probably Marvel and the powers that be in Disney are probably looking at that number as like that would be the threshold to consider this to be a really successful movie and to get it into profitability. I don't think it's going to get there. I think it's actually going to come short of that. But we will see. We will see very shortly here in the next few weeks.